Let me introduce Dr. Swati. Though I had written in the mail, Dr. Swati Sarangi, she is Global Head of Learning, Leadership and Organization Development at Dr. Reddy's Lab. And before that, she was Global Head of Learning, Leadership, she was Head of Learning and Organization Development at L&T. And that's how, we met each other. And we have now a good association of, I think, last 4-5 years. And she has good 2 decades of rich experience in teaching, research, training, consulting, and other people development practices. Now, beyond that, let me share with you, Dr. Swati has, because she has been a professor and now she's a practitioner, so she has that ability of bringing, theory with practice. And that's what I'm sure you would like about her talk. So without taking much time, I would welcome Dr. Swati, and thanks a lot for taking time out of your schedule and agreeing to give this talk to all of us.
Okay, at the outset, thank you, Professor Verma. It's indeed, a very happy moment for me to be in the midst of people who want to learn and share, and that itself is sheer joy. This is something that I really like doing. It's just that sometimes we're caught in the mundane and finding time is difficult. But when he told me about it, I just said, one, I can't say no to him. That's one. Second thing is the cause is so much nice in terms of the learning propensity that I wanted to be a part of it. So there is more takeaway for me than for all of you. Okay, so I just will get into the topic. So as the topic reads, it's leading with emotional intelligence. I'm sure all of you have heard about the term emotional intelligence used in various parlance. And have you all done that? I mean, I'm sure you've heard of any names coming to your mind when you hear the word emotional intelligence? Any theories, any ideas around it?
Daniel Goleman.
Yeah, Daniel Goleman. He's the one. In fact, Daniel Goleman is a consultant. He was not an academician.
And Daniel Kahneman was a professor of economics and had a master's in psychology.
There was Richard Boyasis also, who has worked with Daniel Goleman, and he was a professor. But let me tell you, in fact, the roots of emotional intelligence go back even before Daniel Goleman popularized it in the 1990s. Mayer and Salovey, there were 2 academicians who had researched the topic. They had coined it. But like what happens is when academicians do research, they're very silent about it. Daniel Goleman is the one who made it very usable, okay, in the context of practice, and that's how it became very popular. But whether we give credit to Goleman or we give credit to Mayer and Salovey, I, for a point, believe that theory and practice go together and they evolve with times. So as they evolve, the concepts get refined, and that's what management thought is all about. But there could not be a better time to emphasize the importance of emotional intelligence. What does this symbolize here? This is the thing that we are facing right now. Okay? And why I'm drawing attention to right now is because whether on a personal front or a professional front, we are all, going through different kinds of emotions. Can you see some of the emotions that I have put? Would you like to add some more to the list? Any more to the list that's coming to your mind?
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty, okay. And okay.
Fear of death.
Fear of death. There are lots of things, yes. I want to share with you, this Sunday afternoon, I get a call from one of my team members. He is stuck at Vizag because Dr. Reddy's also has their laboratories in Vizag. His wife is working here in Hyderabad. His father passed away in Delhi. And I was like, how does it feel, when you lose a parent during a time, and, crossing states and borders is absolutely impossible. So they had to go ahead with the cremation. He couldn't sort of pay his last respect. And more so, he was all alone because his family, I mean, his wife and family were here in Hyderabad. So right now, he's traveling from Vizag to Hyderabad. But to look at the surge of emotions this boy, this person has gone through, I was thinking, all of us are battling in some ways. I can tell you I changed jobs, changed, cities, and my family's in Mumbai. Because normally I would do a weekend travel, but that weekend I just thought I'll wait for things to settle down and get better. But it just started gripping. So we all go through these kind of emotions. Now, when we try and understand, it's important for us to dig a little deeper. What exactly are emotions? Where do they come from? Do you feel that emotions are seen in action, or there is something which is triggering that emotion, or it's both? I would want you all to share your views. What do you think are emotions?
It's a reaction.
It's a reaction. It's a response. Is it an impulse? More like something that emerges. And there is a stimulus which causes it, right? And in that corona case, there is a stimulus. And because of that stimulus, there are certain responses. Now, some emotions are more repetitive. We experience them more often. Some emotions are not repetitive and we experience them once in a while. So to put it, straight, there would be same emotion emerging number of times. There would be variety of emotions. The intensity of emotions can also vary. Like, for example, there are times when we are extremely happy. There are times when we are really, really sad. There are times when we are very surprised. So those could be, ways in which we look at it. Well, emotional intelligence. Look at the second term. What does intelligence mean to all of us? What according to you is intelligence in today's world?
Collective consciousness.
Okay, collective consciousness. Very nice. Can you elaborate a little more? What do you mean by that?
Based upon the, our day-to-day experiences, we get insights into many aspects of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can be happy, we can be sad. So collectively, there is an image which is there. Yeah. So collectively, there is an image which is there. Yeah, that is what reflects as intelligence.
Basically, awareness, I would say.
Awareness. Okay, you're talking about emotional intelligence. I was only asking about intelligence alone.
Yeah.
Cognitive maturity, ma'am.
Okay, maturity. So when you say
for me, intelligence would be vocal. It's ability to differentiate between what is good, what is bad.
Like
okay, very good.
Here the point is cognition, ma'am. Cognitive maturity.
Okay, cognitive maturity. Let's understand few of the terms that are coming out.
Is it
Cognitive is got. Yeah. You wanted to say, Sandeep, something?
Yeah, ability to analyze and create.
Okay, ability to analyze and react. So actually, I think intelligence is not what intelligence is, but intelligence is what intelligence does. So, for instance, when we are looking at ability to analyze, here we are trying to say that when somebody is intelligent, we don't look at it about what he knows. That's not the barometer. The barometer is how does he apply it. As some of you will put it in cognition. Cognition is thinking, maybe in behaving. Maybe you said consciousness. So there could be lots of ways in which you sort of deduce and infer that this person is intelligent. And when we talk about emotional intelligence, and now we are fusing the two terms, we had we understood what is emotions, and then we looked at what is intelligence, and moving and drifting away from the traditional IQ, so to say, where we were talking about intelligence quotient. Today we're talking about how decisions can be taken. I heard some of you talk about good and bad. Well, good and bad are little value labels. I don't want to use that. But maybe the correctness of the decision, the effectiveness of the decisions. Or it could be what is contextually right at that point in time for that person. So there could be different things that come into play. But when we talk about emotional intelligence and we are fusing these two words, a new meaning really emerges. And some of you actually said that when you were sort of trying to say what it is. I like the one by Salovey and Mayer, and of course I'll tell you about Goleman. But when Salovey and Mayer talked about it, they said first it's an ability. Ability means you can sharpen it, you can improvise over time. It's not something which is innate. Now, what is this ability? The ability to monitor and regulate one's own emotions and feelings. So when we talk about monitor and regulate, there is a component of awareness. You're monitoring what you're experiencing. And then second, with that awareness, what are you doing? You're also trying to regulate it. When we say regulate it, we are trying to temper it down. If it's too much, too less, the way we express it, how we communicate. Like, for example, all of you know anger is an emotion. All of us feel angry because anger is when, there is a gap between what you expect and what you get. But how do you show your anger? Some of us show, there could be people who throw anger tantrums. That is another. So the expression of that emotion becomes very bad. That is when it has a negative connotation. As such, anger is not something which is in the negative. So monitor and regulate. And then, of course, you're looking at feelings and utilizing the results to guide one's action. So emotions can actually help us and guide our actions in a way which is good for us and good for others that we are interacting in a certain context. For example, when you are dealing with your son or your daughter at home, or your spouse, or your colleagues, or your bosses, or neighbors, every time you may be going through the same emotion, but the way you're expressing, the way you're dealing with it, your actions changes. So that exactly is emotional intelligence. I would like to pause a little bit. Would you like to add something to what Mayor Ansalavi has said? Any thoughts coming to your mind at this stage? Yeah, anybody would like to add on any reflection at this stage on what I said? Yeah.
Sure. Most of us get to know about this reaction. Only difference is the time taken to, I will say, analyze and understand what we have expressed. For example, we get angry, and after anger has vented out, we realize we should not have done this. So this.
Yeah. Right.
So, hi, ma'am, Vikas Rodgi here.
Just one second. I just want to be on the point that he mentioned. What I really like the point that he said that many times we realize after we vented, which means the behavior has happened. And then you go back to the root and say, okay, I could have regulated it, or I could have been aware that the anger was bubbling inside, but it's already too late. So, which means that before the reaction happens, and there's a difference between reaction and response. A reaction is something which is very impromptu, not thought of, but a response is more regulated. So many times when the emotion is in awareness and in regulation, the way we deal with it and the way it manifests will be different, and it will be more in control. Do you agree what you were saying? Is that right? Isn't it right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Could you move to the other person? Somebody else was trying to say something.
Yeah, I'm Vikas. So I was saying that after reading a few of you, I tried actually doing it, because I used to yell when I used to drive my car, and I would shout at people. And then I read a few of the books from these gentlemen and tried to control myself. I would see that I am driving rash, and I would start yelling people. So that thought started coming into my mind that I have read this. I need to control myself, so that I know that this is the trigger wherein I would start yelling at people. And I tried controlling it, and I'm a lot better now, I would say this. So kind of tried controlling it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So you addressed the root. Because the symptoms were, manifesting this way, then you went back and treated, okay, why is it happening and how? So if you can see this Daniel Goleman's model of emotional intelligence, and whenever we talk about emotional intelligence, we do have to sort of visit what Goleman said, and a lot of it, what he said makes sense. And you can see that there are 4 parts to this window, and 2 parts are about self and 2 parts are about others. And the self part, actually, we should focus on the self first and then others next. And then, of course, there's a parallel thing that happens. So when you say the self-awareness, that's very key. knowing that you're getting angry, knowing that this is happening to you, knowing what's, so you know what I observe, that's very, notice what you notice. Many times we forget, we neglect, we are not, because you know, we are so much in the flow of activities and the rush of things that we do not pay heed to these cues. So that is very important. Then second is self-management. See, once you are aware, the anger I'd like to pick on the example that you were saying. After you got aware that this was happening, then you tried to sort of manage it by saying, okay, I read self-help books. I try to say maybe count. Some people do a counting of 1 to 10 before they sort of slam the phone or hurl a few words. Or some people just walk away from that situation. So the way the people deal, the response can be different. But first the awareness, then the management. Similarly, if you look at with others, it is a lot with the way you are viewing others. First thing is that empathy word. I think there's a lot of power in it. I keep talking about it. I have written about it. It's such a beautiful word, and in today's world, very rare to find because we take it for granted. You know, empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Can we feel what he feels? Can we sense what he senses? Because we always look at it because our mind or the cognition is programmed to see it in a certain way. See, whenever there is a tussle between an intellect and emotion, sometimes the emotion gets overpowered, sometimes the intellect gets. But when we talk about empathy, I look at it, or I define it as compassion in action. We are feeling for somebody, but are we showing it, and how are we showing it? Maybe kind words, maybe just pausing, maybe allowing the other person time to think or say. It need not be an over, sort of surge of empathy, like you're going and sort of embracing somebody, but it is empathy in day-to-day, everyday life. And that's such an important thing in all our relationships. And that is where the next part springs from, that is relationship management. The fundamental of all professional and personal relationships is trust. And that trust gets very cemented, gets very forged when it is tempered with empathy. So how do we look at others? Is it from an empathy viewpoint? Instead of judging, are we openly looking at the person, what he's trying to say? How does he try to say this? Or, you know, look at it from an open mind without concluding that he's bad or good or ugly or whatever. Then relationship management is trying to build a unique relationship rather than saying that a father and son relationship should be like this. A boss and subordinate relationship should be like this. The moment we put a should and could, then we, stop the, we close it. We do not allow it to free flow and evolve. Maybe there will be certain systemic demands, structural demands that are there even in homes, families, houses, everywhere, in offices. But nonetheless, it should be like this. So do you like this model? I quite like what Daniel Goleman has said. It's quite nice, the self and the others, and very simple there. So what do you think we can control? Can we control the self and the relationship management? Can we control these two? Are these some things that we can control? Should we try and introspect if we are having problems, or we can do better in these areas? Yes, we should.
Yes.
We should, right? And while we do this, what do we need to go back and try to address? How aware are we of ourselves, and whether or not we are empathetic enough? So if we have issues in the right-hand side of the window, we should go and find out whether the lag is happening because of self-awareness and empathy. Okay, I'd like to move from their models to my model. This is my model. I've in fact posted something on LinkedIn. I spoke about it also in a summit when I traveled to UK. This is called REACH. And I really liked this acronym because I said leaders need to reach out. And there's a lot of power in this word. It really appeals to me. And when you reach out, you're crossing boundaries of self and touching others. And for me, REACH stands for all these. Now, the R part is resilience. Can you see that at the bottom? And as all of you would have heard about it, resilience is, do you have that competence to deal with adversity during the time that you're battling it and beyond? Can you bounce back? Like, for example, when we are stumped with personal setbacks or professional ones, how do we deal with it during that time? And do we have the tenacity to come back? Do we endure enough? So a person who is resilient and a leader who is resilient, for me, is one who can look at possibilities. Okay, I don't have this, I can't do this, but what are the other things that I can do and I can be more in control of? And I also put that other word there, which has hope. You know, hope is when you are looking at a better tomorrow, a silver lining, which will come with the dark clouds. And that's why in resilience, these two are embedded. And when we are, communicating with people who look up to us, we should try and articulate our communication in intonations which are resilient. That will give them a lot of hope and a lot of energy, because they need that, no, when they are looking up to us for something. The second part is empathy. So empathy, I just told you about it. Third is authenticity. I think authenticity, there began a lot of researchers in Harvard, like which the scholars have written about, and we all have experienced. What according to you is authentic? Anybody would like to, you can see my definition there, but I'll tell you more about it, but I'd like to hear a little from you. Who according to you is an authentic person? It's a very simple term, no?
Be what you are.
Be what you are, okay?
An honest person.
Trustworthy.
Genuine.
Yes, genuine, trustworthy.
Transactional integrity.
Yes, integrity, credible. You earn it, right? When you're authentic, you walk the talk.
Walk the talks.
Yes. Can you see I put that word vulnerable?
Our body actions and what we do should match.
Absolutely. Body actions, body language should be in sync with what we say, what you mean and mean what you say. Like that. Yeah. Yes. So that's what. A smile should be a genuine smile, not a faked up one, not a cooked up one. A word should not be sugar coated.
Yes.
But when you say authenticity, I like the word vulnerability.
So,
all of us, please.
So every human being is vulnerable. So usually men doesn't try to be vulnerable in front of others. So when you are vulnerable, that is showing your true self.
Yes, absolutely. Do you like people when they talk about their difficult times?
Absolutely. Why not? I mean, that is sharing of emotions and feelings. So that's absolutely right.
Absolutely. So, we are all human, no? We're all human. At the heart of it, we are human. The more humanness we show, and who is human? A person who will make mistakes, who will go through troubled moments, who will share highs and lows. So when you make self-disclosure means when you tell about yourself, then you are being vulnerable. And when you are vulnerable, you are enduring others. Because people then start saying, there is a barrier broken. That makes you you, and that makes you so genuine. So we should try and build that in our relationships. Maybe how much you say and what you say may be difficult. You can decide to draw your boundaries. But whatever you say and do it in the scope of being very authentic. Because when you're authentic, there is credibility. In the long run, you build a reputation of good character, good values. Then this other one there, courage, REAC. So the C part is courage. Courage, according to me, is the first virtue. Because, when a child is born, he starts having the courage to walk, courage to crawl. You start taking your baby steps also with courage. Like all of us, when we took our professional, when we started our journeys in life, we did things everywhere. Whatever we have done, it has needed a little bit of courage. And the courage is something because you've not done something, you need to go ahead and do it. And sometimes once you perform, you need to outperform. So that's why I've written perform and outperform, and there is a little stretch attached to it. Thoda stretch karna padta hai. And whoever takes that stretch actually becomes a good leader and a visionary. Because you want to expand the horizon, and that is required in today's time. Just imagine, don't you think that this is the time for leaders to just go and be? Because when the world is going through crisis, times are tough, That is the time when you need to show your leadership quality, because we need more of that. Okay, now the last part of it. This is a virtue which is underlying all that empathy which Goleman talks about, or even where Mayer and Salovey have talked about others part of it. Humility is very, very important. And when we talk about humility, it is giving space and respect. Don't impose yourself on others. Everybody is their own person. Can we give the space to them and also respect their standpoint, respect from where they come from? That is where the edge part of it is. So do you like this model? I mean, I quite felt that it's trying to cover a few things, and maybe I'll expand and it'll get evolved with times. But as of now, these are the terms which sort of stood out for me.
Ma'am, one question regarding authenticity.
Sure. Yeah.
Here you're using the word vulnerable.
Yeah.
But in the real sense, what we have seen is that people normally say that you should not reflect that part of your personality where people, if they come to know about your vulnerability, they will exploit it.
I would put it a little differently. So when you are vulnerable, you are just, it's not like you're putting your soul bare. Okay, it's not like that. You are talking about times where you have gone through difficult times and sharing that this was a difficult moment for me, but this is how I came about. I'll just give you an example. That in your homes, don't you share with your kids that मैं जब छोटा था, मेरे साथ ऐसा हुआ, फिर मैंने ऐसे किया, तभी पिटाई पड़ी थी, तभी डांट पड़ी थी, but फिर भी ऐसे, you know, what I'm saying is when we do storytelling, we are sometimes a hero or the heroine, or sometimes there is a villain elsewhere in the story. Okay, but we talk about ourselves as a central protagonist who has gone through different moments. So that is what I mean. And when you are being vulnerable, I don't agree that everybody will go out to exploit you. If you showed your vulnerability in action by saying that this is how I was, but this is the learning for me, or this is where I'm trying to keep in check. Just some time back, somebody shared about the anger while driving. And you were vulnerable when you shared that, right? But you also shared what you're doing to manage it. So vulnerability comes with awareness and management. It is not only with that awareness and disclosure.
Also, madam, I would like to say is that leadership evolves.
Yes.
From day one, you become a leader.
Yes.
Because you have gone through, you had been vulnerable, you had experience. That's why you have evolved, and now you are in a position to help others when they are feeling the same.
Absolutely. I also want to share with you that in this entire REACH model, one thing which stands out for me, and I'm sure for many of you, is that a good leader and an emotionally intelligent leader is one who's high on learning propensity. When you're authentic, you're willing to admit that you're not there. You have to get there. You have to try. You're failed. You're work in progress. Okay. So what we are also saying that in all that leaders grow and evolve, there is learning happening.
Ma'am, one question.
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, this is Dhruv. I've got a question regarding humility. Could you elaborate a little bit on the underline which says giving space and respect? So I want to understand a little bit from your perspective about this giving space in humility, as you explained about vulnerability.
Yeah. So I'm just telling you, giving space. Let me give you an example of, say, a spouse at home, and then you can take any other example. You've often seen that in homes, the spouses are different in many ways and similar in some. Now, when you say giving space, it means that don't expect somebody to be like a clone of you or think exactly like you. Very often, people think very differently and yet they hit it off because they are able to respect the differences. They agree to disagree. So when you agree to disagree, there is an amount of space that you're giving to the person that, look, this is how I think, this is how I feel, this is how I behave. I come as a package and so do you. So when we are coexisting in the way that our paths cross. It could be at workspace also. Like, you're working with a colleague who's very different from you. But you have respect from where he comes from. Like, for example, when we work in places, you have people who have gone to vernacular mediums, people who have had global stints, people who have been homegrown leaders, people who are lateral hires. You allow people the space and the respect to share and be themselves. Only then there is, possibilities of growth together. That's what I mean. Am I answering your question? Have you got some insights?
Okay, thank you, ma'am. But on the same, ma'am, on the same line, I had different, like just an observation, because when we live as a family together, we don't have as such a purpose or a target to look that, okay, we are living as a family and by this weekend we'll achieve such and such targets, or by year end we'll be looking forward to that achievement. But in an organization, on a lower level perspective, the team is working together, keeping in mind that goal. So, yes.
Yeah, so let me share with you my personal experience, and I shall talk about a great leader, and I will move from this point. Yes. So one is my personal experience is that, yes, you're right, that when we are working in an enterprise, the company's goals drive us more than our personal goals. So sometimes it's about the shared vision that is more important. And while the shared, we may not entirely accept the shared vision, we have to be channelizing our energies in realization of it. And each of us playing our own parts. And when I say each of us playing our own parts, no contribution is less a contribution. Each person exists in the system for a purpose. Okay, so you might have a hierarchy in an organization. Now, nevertheless, every person has a role to play and his contribution counts. So when you are humble, you have respect for people despite the formal designations that they hold or the titles that they have or the experience that they bring. You might have, like, let me tell you, I have a very young team member, just pass out from one of the IIMs. Extremely intelligent and talented. There is a lot of learning that I take. At the same time, I have somebody who is a 55-year-old, much older than I in my team. I still give him the respect because he likes to share his experiences and what his learnings have been. I can't use a one-size-fits-all for everybody or expect everyone to think the way I do. The leader should build a culture which is empowering. And when we say humility, it is tempered with giving respect to the others' viewpoint and giving them the space to contribute in the way that they can, rather than making them typecast and saying that this is the way to be. Okay, that is what I mean.
Thank you, ma'am.
I want to give an example of
Nitin here.
I want to say something.
Yeah.
Here, courage and authenticity is a personalized. It's very easy to practice its individual capacity. When you think about humility, empathy, and resilience, this is very, very wonderful subject to a word to hear. And when it's easy to manage with corporate companies or IIM, IITs and all. But how will you work out in this small companies, small industries and small area? Don't you think it's very difficult to do this because people take undue advantage of giving humility, empathy and resilience? If you are there, you cannot raise yourself as a leader at all.
First thing is, I don't know how you define leadership. For me, leadership is has got nothing to do with formal authority and positions. Okay, that's number one. I'm making a disclaimer that I believe that every person is a leader in his own right. Okay, going by the parlance that is used in the corporate lingo, that people who have and hold positions of power are leaders. Okay, and if you are making a statement that it is not possible in a smaller setup, I think it's a myth. Because when you are talking about, there are a lot of small organizations, like say a family-owned business. I think you're on mute. You're on mute. Venkatesh, you're on mute.
I'm not telling it's not possible. I'm only working out how will you balance that in a smaller area, smaller segment area, as compared to highly educated or organized sector, unorganized sector.
Okay.
That is what I'm just asking you to give an idea. I'm not telling
you
just become a power of leader. Leader define can be done in individual perception.
Okay, sure. So let me give you examples by saying that you could have a very small shop. Okay, I'm talking about a mom and pop store, like a Kirana store, and where there are only 3 people working, and there is a person who owns the store, and there are 2 helpers. And yet there could be a lot of humility that the person who is the owner means he's the promoter, owner, displays towards the people whom he has employed. Now, humility is again seen in behavior, in the way the choice of words, maybe gratitude that is shown. So there could be small acts of kindness which also lead to humility. And it's not only about kindness from a pedestal that you give, but it is about a little bit of equanimity that you show. Okay, in terms of, okay, he's also a person like me, maybe at a position lower than me, but do I respect from where he comes from? Then you start looking at issues that he shares with a little more open mind, and that is where. And resilience for me, it's like, and I'm sure others will also agree, it's a virtue where you are looking at bouncing back. And if you've read Satya Nadella's book, Hit Refresh, and he's one of the leaders that I truly admire. He has got kids at home who are, sort of mentally challenged, and raising them up gave him a lot of empathy, which he brought back to workplace. And Microsoft at that point in time, when he came in, was really not doing well. They crossed the 1 trillion mark because of the new and open cultural practices that he brought about. I have seen promoter-driven organizations, large organizations, smaller organizations. So I'm again telling you, it's a lot about walk the talk. So let's not assume that the scope of the place or the nature of the organization will define whether or not humility can happen. If you're dealing with people who are not qualified or not educated, so to say, in that sense, literally, they're not educated, you can still be kind and make them do acts which they've never done before, because you are showing belief in their abilities. My dad was an entrepreneur. He's worked with people who have been really, coming from Orissa. A lot of people, it's being a backward state, who had not really gone to the affluent schools and studied there. But I have seen them grow leaps and bounds by just giving them, by treating them well with humility and empathy and all of that. They've grown with time. And a couple of them have even set up their own businesses and done things for themselves and done very well. So all that has happened because, again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Self-fulfilling prophecy means, can you make them believe in their own potential? So a leader's role also extends to making people believe in what they are capable of becoming. Help people become better versions of themselves, not clones of you, is what I can say.
So Dr. Swati, when you are talking about empathy,
thank you, madam.
and
You have given
respect,
very good.
Dr. Swati, this is Soumitra here.
Doctor, when you are talking about respect and empathy to be shown to people, in field of talent management, most of the time they refer to people as resources. When did people become resources?
Okay. I really don't know why this term is used, but when you look at it positively, resource means something which is not, you can sort of keep on reaping dividends or harvest. It can be reused to give you better, investments and returns. So look at it that way. Imagine people who are there. You can really convert talent. Again, just as intelligence is not what intelligence is, but what intelligence does. Similarly, talent can be made resource, if you're really looking at that way, by creating environments and cultures and systems where they can contribute. So giving them that freedom to think, to come out, all that, and within the framework, because you can't really set them absolutely free. Okay, I really like the questions, but can we just move?
Thank you,
Dr. Swati, just last one. This is Soumitra here, Dr. Swati. I'm a marketer. I have a perspective, slightly observation, and I would request you if you can validate that. I think saying reach is slightly idealistic. I think it's controlled reach. And the context that I'm saying is this, that brands are also human. And these tools are actually weapons for people like us, who message brands in the market. But at the same time, these brands needs to also convey the message which is controlled, and it cannot be entirely emotional led. That's what I'm trying to say. So now to give you an example, I mean, how many of you have seen a PepsiCo or PepsiCo coming and saying that Pepsi is bad for health? So what I'm saying that is good to be authentic, but lot of times it doesn't get commercialized, you know. So is it right observation to say that, you know, it's a controlled reach rather than, you know, being idealistic of building that perception of a which is slightly more academic?
So let me tell you, first thing is I'm talking about leadership behaviors and not brands. While you may agree that brands are living entities, that you're making a Pepsi to be a living organization, and organizations do have life because of the people and philosophy that they have. But I was here trying to make a point about leadership behaviors, that is of people who have life and blood. Okay? Just talking about them. Now, controlled reach versus tempered reach, I can tell you, the way you define authenticity for you will be very different in the way that somebody else sees it. And this is not an academic framework that I'm putting across. What I'm putting across is my experience that I've had with leaders, in building leaders, leadership development work that I have done, leaders that I've interacted and sparred with and seen in action and otherwise. So when you are authentic, you're talking about your hits and misses. Doesn't mean that you go all out and say that this is where I'm full of flaws. It's not like that. Obviously, it is tempered. That is where, when you talk about emotional intelligence, the word regulation appears. Regulation means you are regulating the expression and the management of it. When you say self, there is a component of self-management. There is a relationship management. If PepsiCo or Coke as a company wants to establish its brand identity for being a company, if you've seen, they're also into CSR and a lot of corporate social responsibilities. For me, brand has value. It has identity. It wants to have recall. You want to have a brand value proposition. You want to get your people who use the brands to be loyal to you. How do you get people to do all of that? You get that because that's where all the CSR activities of these companies come into play. So today, when you think of some company like Pepsi or Coke, you will also know that they're known for other things. When Indira Nooyi in Pepsi started move from the cola and the fuzzy drinks to the non-cola segment, that was when she looked at the market and said, here is a market segment which is also wanting to move towards health. Can I look at that segment? Was it a business move? Yes, it was a business move because it helped PepsiCo change and turn its business portfolio. Did that come from business prudence? Yes, it came from business prudence with her education in corporate strategy and all of that she had studied at Yale and IM and earlier on. Her experience. But did she temper that? When I said temper that with authenticity, yes, she did that. I've seen Nooyi's videos, and Indira is a role model for me in many ways. For the woman of substance that she has been, she would have her failings, but I have seen the way she has sort of lived the values of that company and beyond after she also retired. Okay, passing on the baton. So what I'm saying is, let's not try to stereotype and typecast and say this is the way we want to do it. How do you put reach in action is your call. You may want to dial up a particular tenet of this. Maybe for you, for example, it could be empathy. Maybe at a given point in time, it could be more resilience that is required of you. But generally, leaders who are emotionally intelligent display these behaviors. That is what I'm trying to say. They display these behaviors. Some of it, they may be displaying more. For example, empathy quotient is higher in, say, some more leaders. Maybe some will show greater resilience. They've taken the company out of troubled waters. That's why resilience, like that. So let me just move a little, then we can come back. This is something which I thought would interest you because this is talking about how leaders derail. And it would probably, Soumitra, lead to some of the questions that were coming in your mind. Leaders are not perfect. While they are meant to be role models, they derail emotionally on these fronts without realizing that they do. Sometimes they push people too much, okay? And that is when the organizational mandate is, okay, go get the profits or, curtail the cost. What will you do? You'll start laying off people or you'll start giving them less and you'll start. So, maybe there also try and see how authentic you can be. Can you have a candid conversation with somebody at the right time and say, look, I'm here to give you an update. Times are tough. Your job might be at risk. And once it comes through, can you help him settle down with another? I'm just trying to say it could be a tough call or a tough decision, but do you do it in a way which still is a better version of how you can handle it? So pushing too hard, not till it hurts. I like this term also, power hungry. Sometimes, we get fixated with the positions, and that's how not to have it at any cost. Power shared is always better as to the extent possible. Glory addiction is again when people hanker for recognition and they're too blinded with what they want to achieve or be known for. The perfectionist, sometimes in your bid to be perfect, you might be slaughtering quite a few or wanting to prove that you're right. And most of the times you'll see people are also wanting to be in the relentless striving mode. Like, I want to be crashing and burning and proving that I'm the great leader. That is also when you're not doing justice to your own emotions, your own emotional well-being and health. And imagine if you're not healthy inside, you're likely to sort of flare up, or in a moment when there's a pressure cooker, you might just burst out. So you should ensure that you don't burn out. Do you all agree with me that you could fall into some of these or many of these, or maybe others also? Any more points coming to your mind?
Yes, there was a young CEO who died in his 30s. He died in his 30s because of the stress that he was taking.
Absolutely. Steve
I
Jobs.
think,
Now BMW CEO also we saw because of that, but he had a heart attack. Yeah.
So, Doctor, effective delegation also, I think, is something that we should use as a tool. I mean, it comes under your honesty tab, right?
Yes.
Not micromanaging people.
Absolutely.
Effectively delegate.
Yeah.
Delegating is the key, I suppose. Delegating is the key.
Yeah. I want to tell you a little bit about delegation, and I really feel very strongly about it.
Rich, am I audible?
Yeah. I said I want to I really like the point you brought about delegation, and I want to spend a little time on that since you brought that out, and I really second that. So delegation is...
Hello?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah, delegation is sort of being prudent to sort of give your power to do to somebody else because you think he's mature enough. So that decision to let go some of your work, which can be done by others, so that you make space for better work. So that is also, it's a very fine balance again. And when you are delegating, you're actually making time for yourself, more strategic stuff which you can do. So you know how leaders derail when they become excessively prudent. When we say prudent means bahut zyada, you're just trying to look at everything. Then you become derailed by micromanaging. So when the same virtue of yours, which is being very conscientious or looking at rules, regulations, abiding by the same, process driven, might become a derailer when you become very, very micromanaging. So please understand where your emotions can, like for example, somebody is a risk taker. It's a very good virtue. It's a very good, but a person who is a risk taker can derail when he plays with his emotions and becomes very bold, very overtly bold. It can happen, no? Overtly bold. Like if you look at the Malia kinds, overtly bold, not overtly colorful. Could be that way also. So I'm saying that watch out that even your own strengths can sometimes become your very weaknesses. That is where your emotions can cost you. And when you Soumitra, somebody was mentioning about, reach which is tempered or, within limits. I want to tell you, do the way you reach out can be yours. The way, how you reach out can be yours, but maybe keep these tenets in mind. That's what I was only trying to say. So please understand what will work for you and that's only unique to you. Yeah. Any other thoughts at this stage? I'm just wary of the time. I'm looking at the watch as I speak to you all.
Dr. Swati, point from my side is that though these are points which you say emotionally derail leaders, but don't you think that this is what leaders are looking in their subordinates? Basically, these qualities are they should be able to push hard. They should have the hunger to achieve. They should add glory to the organization. I want a perfectionist. So that's how they want to pick these people up. So that is where the trap lies, right? So that is the question I wanted to put across.
So the trap is twofold. One is they themselves become like this, and other is they like people who are like this. It's like that. So they become victims of this, and they also like people who are like this, clones of this, because it suits their purpose. But in the short run, yes, but in the long run, no. Because in the short run, you might be able to, so when I look at it this way, when a person is engaged, he is satisfied and he's contributing. So when you push somebody too much, the contribution may be high, but he will get into the crash and burn category. Because very soon, his satisfaction levels will dwindle. So that same person who was a star for you will relegate to becoming, he'll try to alter either his contribution, it will get altered, or he will alter it, or his satisfaction will drop, so he will look out for a job elsewhere. So you have to take care of people in balance. And I want to use the word balance a little more, because the point that you brought about is really true, and the corona times that we are witnessing is a powerful sort of a shake for all of us to realize that we humans as a species have lost out in balance. And that's where we've landed. Today, when you're at home and you're doing your chores, you realize that, probably you were working in a mode which was so much like this and not really required. And sometimes, you're paying attention to what you neglected, or you are getting in touch with what you'd forgotten. So many times emotions is also about being true to what you're experiencing, and also being open to getting feedback from others. So feedback can come from your subordinates or your team members when they are passively aggressive. They may agree to what you say, but not happy within. So are you open to those cues? Do you understand the unmet? Do you pick up the non-verbal cues? A team member walking out of a meeting and saying, okay, sir, ho jayega. But that okay, sir is with a very heavy heart. 3 बार 4 बार okay, sir होगा. 4थी बार वो नहीं करेगा ना, और करेगा भी तो कैसे करेगा? Okay, these are the 3 things that you could probably look at, and I'm not some kind of a doctor here rolling out a to-do list as an antidote to dealing with problems and being emotionally intelligent leaders, but my thoughts around these 3 things which have worked for me, and I've seen it work for others as well. So being mindful. Mindful is, as most of you, if you've seen in the examples that you shared, and what we are discussing today, it's a lot about right here, right now. Are we mindful and being present? Because the more mindful you are, the better your diagnosis is. Like, we are our own doctors. Can we pick up the symptoms? Abhi gussa aa raha hai, abhi dard mein hai. Khud ka, how do you be more mindful? Second is finding joy. Joy in small things. Like, for example, when there are tough times, there are crises, company goes to downturns, or the sector goes, or there are blows otherwise. Can you find joys in small pleasures? Sometimes, they wouldn't even cost too much, but it could be a smile, it could be a hug, it could be even a kind word, or it could be an exchange, like pick up a phone call and talk to someone who you've not spoken in a long time. And then third one, important, gratitude. It's a lot, you might think that all these 3 are very soft words in a corporate world. But let me tell you, the soft ones get the hard stuff coming. If you want the mullahs coming and you want the hard stuff coming your way and you want to last the tough times, you will have to have a culture which is very enabling. And you have to give people a place which is empowering. Otherwise, as someone pointed out in the beginning, I really like that question, talent and when did people become resources? You have to allow them to be more human. Whenever times are tough, these could be the coping mechanisms that normally people exhibit. You must have heard of it. Fight, flight, or freeze. These are all very extreme negative states. We should not get into these modes ourselves. We should also help others not get into this mode. People whom we can help, because we are leading, right? So people who look up to us in our homes, in our offices, we should understand when a person is in a freeze mode. Is he getting into a flight mode? Flight risk, sometimes employees are at flight risk also. Or is he, going to fight back? So you please try and understand where the threshold limits are. And I would like to end today's session by saying, as leaders, we have to be good role models who are emotionally intelligent. Can we aspire to inspire people? Inspire through our words, actions, and of course, emotions. That is how I would like to leave you all with these thoughts and open to a few questions. We have some more time, I think.
Yeah. Hi, ma'am. This is Amit here.
Yeah.
Do you think that in daily our lives actually is that meditation, and spirituality kind of help us actually, to improve?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely. So when you're talking about being mindful, you might want to pick up techniques which help you to be mindful. For some, it could be even walking, or it could be cooking a meal with full concentration, or taking to a painting. My dad has started, taking to the paintbrush. at this age. So sometimes it could be meditating. Sometimes it could be saying a prayer. So whatever makes you be more in control. That is why they say this pranayam. What is pranayam? Breath. Breath ke upar niyam, pranayam. So when you are doing pranayam, you are becoming more aware. Yoga. What is yoga? It is union with the superior power, God, no? So all of these traditional, philosophies that we have of self-care, self-management, they have their roots in helping us to manage our emotions. If you eat the right ahar, again, you get better energy. Ahar se vichar hota hai na? And likewise also, it could be exercise, it could be fun moments, it could be anything. It could be, so you find out what is your emotional moji, which gives you that high.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Swati.
So, ma'am, multitasking is a flawed word or what? Because mindfulness, I hear a lot from you people, but
yeah,
I hear from the seniors that you should be doing all the time multitasking things. So, how
I want to explain this to you. Multitasking does not mean that you do 10 tasks together. It means that your work can have A, B, C, D. But when you are doing A, do A and then move to B. So that particular, in fact, there are proven researches, whether it's Einstein talking about it or any social scientists, that when we are talking about multitasking, it means the ability and dexterity to move from and swap and switch from one task to another with ease. Okay, so your ability to handle multiple tasks, like for example, I have 4 teams which report on to me. All the 4 teams are doing very different kinds of work. They're not, while they're part of learning and development, some of it is around leadership, some of it is around organizational development, technical training. All the functions are different. So when I multitask, I'm managing all the 4, but when I'm concentrating and having a conversation with one lead from on a particular issue, my mind is there. I'm helping them resolve and contribute at that point in time in that issue. After I finish that activity, I will move to my next task. Doesn't mean that I'm doing task A and I'm also typing here and doing task B. Then task A and task B, both quality will suffer. And I'm neither here nor there.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Swati.
Yeah.
It was all very wonderful, but the last concluding slide was, I think, defines what you have been trying to say. I think one thing which defines a good emotionally strong leader is the one who is also always keen to build leaders for tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.
As long as, keep treating people as subordinates or in that servant master kind of role, I think that's defines between emotionally strong leaders and those so-called.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for this, because
Dr. Swati,
no, and let's just build a little on what he said. Such a beautiful thing, no? Leaders building more leaders. In fact, leaders create more leaders, and that's what makes them true leaders. So you build a legacy of leadership. The people who are looked up to as leaders are much beyond after they have left formally serving in those positions. So it's not titles, it's not positions, it's what you do and how you touch and transform lives of others. Yeah, please.
You were saying something. Book? Yeah, can you suggest good book on EI?
So good books, I told you, Daniel Goleman has written a couple of books and they're all very good. So if you want to really know more about the theory and book, you can pick it up. In today's world, Google, a lot of soft copy versions are available. You can even read some white papers. When I say white papers, it means that the papers are easily accessible. Some are practitioner, researcher kind of papers. You can just pick up something and read. So reading, there are a lot of literature around emotional intelligence. So you may feel free to read up anything, but Goleman is considered to be a seminal work in emotional intelligence. Mayer and Salovey, they've also done some very good work. I like their concept of mood repair. How do you repair your moods? We all go through bad and good moods, no? So how do you repair your mood? So I had written a research paper on how emotional intelligence leads to high employee engagement. And I found that people who are more emotionally intelligent, which means they can manage themselves better, their moods and their feelings better, they're actually better engaged.
Can you share the paper details, research paper details, Dr. Swati?
Yeah, I think you can do a Scholar Google and look up at it. But yeah, I will I will share. It is one of the very old papers that I had
That's
written.
fine. Old is gold.
Really picking up and reading. And now there are a lot of new researchers in this field. You know, there's a concept called social intelligence, which Goleman himself improvised. Somebody talked about this modified reach, no? So it says that be aware of the context and apply your intelligence to see what will work there. So that is social intelligence. Korn Ferry, you must have heard, is a consulting organization. They have also done some work around social intelligence. So social intelligence is knowing the context. You know the actors and even the context. So the contextual awareness is what makes. So there are some people who जिनको जुगाड़ आता है. They know the nuances of the place. Politics कैसा चलता है उधर. They may not be party to it, but they can navigate through it. So that is social intelligence. So there are a lot of new things talked about.
Yeah, ma'am, I have got a question here. Hello.
Yeah.
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 So, ma'am, I joined the session a bit late, but then I mean the question is relevant. So this is pertaining to your, I think, last but one slide, which is talking about the flight, fight, and freeze. So another leadership style, which probably, I mean, I personally believe that I too follow that too much, and it's upcoming. That is the radical candor, wherein we, challenge directly, but we care personally. And I mean, a lot of work have been studying around it. So I found that it leads to a good growth trajectory usually.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, but in case, I mean, I'm a great follower of this leadership style, which I exercise at workplace. So, but I really need to understand how, your viewpoint on, in case I see this dwindling between where I face situations of fight, flight, and freeze.
So when you see this dwindling, you will have to find out ways to check it, because otherwise what will happen, they will take manifestations which will be beyond control. And also look out for early symptoms. Like, for example, just to give you an example of the flight index, before a person is in the flight mode, he will display certain behaviors. Like maybe he'll flutter more. Flutter more means he will be showing restlessness. Or when a person is frightened, there would be, so you have to find out what is the symptoms that he's displaying. And when you can pick those early cues, then you can provide some relief, and that situation will not get aggravated. So the more responsive you are to the cues that are being manifested by the people that you work with, or you are living with or interacting with, you can provide relief and control. So the relationship management will become better. There is a lot of work that can be done around justice, can be done around trust, which are playing a very important role in building relationships. So you can deal with a lot of this. Like, for example, when people see, wisdom in what you do and what you say, there is for example, they see that there is procedural justice. Then you can explain to them that, look, you haven't got your rewards, but there is a procedure that has been followed, or the interactions that you conduct with them, that also can be right. So I'm just saying that a lot of it is linked to a lot of other constructs.
I've heard there is a term IQ, that is intelligentsia quotient, and EQ, emotional quotient. And so I have categorized into 4 parts, because some people have both. Some people have only IQ and very less of EQ, and some people have a greater EQ and less of IQ. So how do you define that? And so some people have very less both.
Yeah, so I have not really defined them that way, because you are just putting them in types and saying कि इसके पास A है, B है, B है, A है. So I'm not done it.
The percentage wise, less greater or lesser.
So how
is there any relationship between both?
No. So let me tell you, there is no relationship first, because there are people who have high IQ and have also high EQ.
Yes.
It's possible. Yeah.
Yes.
So there are people who have high IQ but very low EQ.
Yes.
There is reverse is also possible, very high EQ but even low IQ. It's possible, no?
So that's what I'm saying.
It's possible. So it's possible. But here I'm talking about, when you're talking about leaders who are occupying, say, you know, maybe sort of not positions, I would say, but have some responsibilities. They have some responsibilities. We're assuming that they know their jobs well. Okay, that is why they are given responsibility to handle some work. So when they know their jobs well, what will take them from this level to the next level will be that EQ. Because everybody knows their job. The day-to-day job or the jobs that need to be done, mandated by organization, can be done in a certain measure by everybody. But the real differentiator will come through EQ. Yes. Because the person who can take people along. So I always use, I like to use these two terms, creators and connectors. When leaders are good creators, they can create ideas, they can envision things, they can create business goals. They should also be good connectors. That means they should connect with people and take them along so that whatever they are wanting to create can become a reality. Warren Bennis has written, leaders are those who turn visions into reality. What is vision if it is not implemented? You need people to do it. It's not a one-man army, right?
No, I said this in terms of the human being, not the leaders.
Okay, like all people.
Sure.
Yes. You know that, right? I like what you're saying, will and skill kind of a thing. You know, either you have that ability to do tasks or ability to handle people. You can have both. You can ideally both. That's what we should look at. Yes. And emotional intelligent people are generally more successful in life. Yes. And researchers have proven that. And we should try and get more in touch with our emotions. And I like that last slide of mine, which I said, aspire to inspire. When I'm using the word aspire, because we're not really there. We're all in journeys of learning. But at the same time, can we all be inspirational in some ways? And when will we become inspiration? When people believe in what we say, and more importantly, believe in what we want to do or do.
I have one question. Leadership, which style of leadership do you agree?
So there are a lot of books around leadership. Okay, you just name it. It's all started. Like if you look at trait theories of leadership, uske baad behavioral theories aaya, Blake and Morton, then Hershey Blanchard, servant leadership, situational leadership, bhar ke leadership books hai. So
I know, but which style of leadership we should believe or agree on it?
No.
I keep reading John Maxwell leadership books.
So so my view is that you read books, form your own insight and your opinion about what could be a good takeaway from that author. See, that author or that theorist is giving his point of view based on certain studies that he has done. Now, you may want to contextualize that in your case. Like, for example, you may pick up what John Maxwell has said, one trait of it, and say, okay, I want to look at this part. But I also like some other servant leadership or something else which has come about, which also appeals to me. So what you form could be an amalgamation of various viewpoints and strains of thought. Some could be even based on your Hindu texts or your Islamic, ones, or maybe the Bible also. It could be like that.
Yeah.
Experience can teach us.
Well said. Yeah, true. Well said. Thanks.
Professor Verma, is he there?
Yeah, I'm there.
I'm just thinking, I also have some meetings, and it has been a wonderful interaction.
It was wonderful. 290 plus people benefited from your talk, and you can see in the chat box. I'm sure that you were talking, and so you were not looking at the chat box.
No, I'm not looked at the chat box.
A lot of people have a lot of appreciation for you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Swati. It was really wonderful, and I also learned a lot. I will read some of these books.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Madam, can we share the PPT?
Yeah, of course. So, Professor Verma, I'm requesting you to share the PPT with this audience and August group. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Wonderful being in your midst. I learned a lot by the way of questions and the inquiry that you let's keep our minds open and explore more and become more emotionally intelligent every day.
Thanks a lot.
So much.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. Take care. Thank you, Sanjay sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.